Great. Who has ever read a report of the IPCC, rapport du GIEC? Okay, not so much. I'm very, very happy because a few years ago, the sport ecosystem was not so much involved in this big event. You know, the sport industry is more and more addressing and tackling sustainable issues. Few figures to share to all of you. Do you know, in 2023, how many deals with non-sustainable companies have been done between the sport industry and polluting one? Do you know how much? How many? 250 deals have been done between polluting companies and the sport ecosystem. In the football industry, 55 deals have been done between clubs and polluting organizations. So the sport industry needs to change. The sport industry needs to tackle this issue. And we will speak with amazing panelists today about a very interesting topic, that's to say, how can we link the sport ecosystem with the Paris Agreement. So before beginning, please make an upload for Chloé Léger. Chloé. Chloé, we are waiting for you. Chloé, where are you? Chloé? So we will speak about an interesting topic. Chloé, floor is yours.
So a few months ago, in this very venue, was held one of the biggest sporting events. And I have one question for you today. What would the Paralympic and Olympic Games look like in 2048? This question, we asked it to 48 elite athletes from different sports and different backgrounds. And thanks to them, through different workshops and consulting with experts, we created 4 different scenarios on the future of sports. These 4 scenarios are based on the 2050 scenarios from l'ADEME, and all paint a picture of what the future of sports can develop to be. So, what are these 4 scenarios? Well, scenario 1, we have a very low-tech future with drastic reductions in consumption. In scenario 2, we're more on creating competitions and sporting around sharing and cooperation. Scenario 3 is about green tech innovations and limiting impact. And on the other end of the spectrum, well, we have scenario 4 that's hyper-connected and a high-tech sports world. So all of these scenarios, all of these 4 scenarios all respect the Paris Agreement. They all have some positives, they all have some negatives, and I'm sorry to break it to you today, but there is no perfect future. The good news is we can choose which scenario we want to live in, and that's exactly what we've been doing with Sports 2048 for the past few months. We've been collecting votes from athletes, but also medias and sponsors and fans, of course, to see which future they want to live in. And looking at the results, scenario 2 is definitely taking the lead.
What is it? What is this scenario 2? Can you describe it to us?
So scenario 2 is really centered about sports being there for society. So inclusion, equality, especially around para-athletes, well-being, social impact, those are all front and center when it comes to sports and competitions. So here, the purpose of sports is to accelerate and be a platform for change. For example, we take 1,000 people all around the world, randomly selected, to be part of a Convention citoyenne du sport, a kind of citizenship convention around sports, and they get to choose, they get to design what sports and the Olympic and Paralympic Games will look like. But sports competitions are also completely reimagined. We don't build new stadiums, we use existing venues like this one to adapt them to the sporting competition. And if you're lucky enough to live in the city where the games are hosted, You may host an athlete in your own home. It's the entire city that becomes the Olympic Village. Athletes can travel by plane to come to the events, but for their return journey, to reduce consumption and reduce emissions, they use different sources of mobility and take their time to travel back. It's kind of a new tradition called a caravan, and they stop off in all these different cities and they celebrate their victory with the populations in these cities. And every time they stop off, it turns into a huge party. And finally, sponsoring, well, that's a huge question. What does sponsoring look like in 2048? It's a little different, and brands who don't meet certain standards in terms of environmental and health standards, they must pay a tax. And this tax and this money collected is used to then sponsor the sports industry. It's kind of seen as a way to invest in the well-being and health of the whole population, and it reduces costs down the line. So I know what I've just kind of shared might be a little, you might not be fully agree to it. You might not be quite sure if you're exactly want to be in scenario 2 or another scenario, and that's the whole point of this campaign. We created 4 different scenarios, and it's to kind of see what people think. So if you're interested and you're curious and you want to know a little bit more, there are 4 different short stories that you can read on each different scenarios on our site, Sports 2048. And most importantly, you need to come vote. And we know that voting is super important. And you can vote for the future that you want to see for sports.
Thank you, Chloé. So please vote for the sports scenario. We can applaud her. Thank you very much, Chloé. Thank you again for your time with us.
Thank you.
That's cool. That's great. So now, we are very lucky because the IOC is among us, the chief project also. So please make an applaud for Marie Sallois and Matthieu Auzanneau. How are you doing? So thank you very much for being there with us. We will begin by you, Marie. Thank you very much to be there with us today. The first question that I have for you, Marie, as a catalyst for change and innovation, how does the IOC try to gather all the stakeholders to fit with the Paris Agreement? How do you do to gather everyone to try to tackle and answer this issue?
D'abord, bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone. Do you feel the Olympic spirit? After having heard from all these Olympians, how many of you have watched the Olympic Games?
Wow, I think everyone.
How many of you remember that this very venue was a venue for the Olympic and Paralympic Games Paris 2024? What sport was practiced here? Do you remember? Fencing, yes. And what else? Taekwondo. Do you remember the Olympians coming down this very staircase on both sides where actually you are sitting just before their competition? And the fact that where we stand was actually where they were competing? Do you remember what you just heard earlier? That you watched amazing athletes. I mean, we had amazing emotions of seeing them in the field of play, competing at their best. But what did you see apart from that? You saw people from 206 territories, including Afghan athletes. You saw as many women fighting and winning as men for the first time because they were the first parity games. And you saw also the refugee team that we heard earlier. So what you saw was sport at its best, but also humanity at its best. And I think this is important before we talk about decarbonization, because the Olympic Games are about sport, but more than sport. Let's not forget we are about building a better world for over 100 years. So why does it matter? As we celebrate and we take stock of the legacy of the Paris Agreement, we also take stock of 10 years of a transformation journey that we started in 2015. when we launched Olympic Agenda, a roadmap for change. We also celebrate 10 years of recognition of sport being an enabler for sustainable development. So for us, it's very important because since 2015, we have really elevated sustainability, decarbonization, climate action as a strategic priority. And this was done as a result of a consultation process throughout the Olympic movement, but also with all the stakeholders. So what did we commit to in 2015? And why are we happy to be with you today to actually present the results of this journey? We commit to put sustainability at the very heart of our decision-making process. We committed to align with the Paris Agreement, and in everything we were doing, to reduce the footprint to really the maximum and maximize the positive impact. So that's the commitment we made 10 years ago, and we are very happy to stand in front of you to actually report on these results, knowing that Paris 2024, that you all watched, was the first edition to fully benefit from this agenda of change from start to finish. And it was a way for us to demonstrate that, yes, you can cut by half the carbon footprint of the Games.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for that. Do you know that in the sport industry, we have a lot of very interesting think tanks, like the think tank Sport and Citizenship. We have also another one. Who knows the think tank, the Shift Project? Who knows the Shift Project here? Okay. So Matthieu, you know the Shift Project, I think. So you are the director, the executive director. Can you maybe share what is the think tank and also speak about one of your latest reports around decarbonization of the sport industry?
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for inviting us to share this report that we did on the carbon footprint of sports in France. The Shift Project, a few words about it. It's a non-for-profit organization, a think tank, probably, arguably, the most influential in France when it comes to decarbonization. And we published a couple of months ago, a study of the carbon footprint of specifically football and rugby in France, with analog results for any kind of amateur or professional sports. And the main result boils down to this. It's going to be hard to decarbonize sports, whether it's football, rugby, you name it, if we don't cope with the use of oil for transports. Basically, half of the carbon footprint of sports comes from transportation. That's no surprise, but that's huge, and that's the most complicated part to deal with. It's roughly half of the footprint. When you focus on professional sports, this share of transportations goes up to 80%. The more you regard, obviously, international events, the more this share of petroleum for transportation overweights the carbon footprint. For instance, an international game, an international match can have 40 to 50 times more carbon emission than a domestic professional sport in France. So that's half or even more of the footprint that comes from transportation. And then you have 20% that comes from gears, equipment, with the problem that there's a very short lifespan for many equipments that are produced from petroleum. To give you an example, in France we are 60 million people. There are 60 million inhabitants in France. Most of them are not don't play football or don't play rugby. So 60 million inhabitants in France, 80 million sports equipment sold every year in France. So that's huge, and that's a large part of the footprint, 20% of the carbon footprint of sports.
Okay.
So when you have transportation, equipment, and then also infrastructures, you have let's say 80 to 90% of the carbon footprints of sports.
Okay.
In the example that we focus on, that is rugby and football in France, but you can have the same shares for any kind of sports when you have a lot of equipment changed very frequently, and a large part of the transportation that relies on petroleum.
Okay. Thank you, Matthieu. And you can read this report. It's very, very interesting, done by the Shift Project. To come back to you, Marie, the IOC has pledged to align with the Paris Agreement. Can you share some concrete action and project that reflect this commitment within the IOC?
Yes, thank you. When we pledged this commitment, we knew from the beginning that we had to do that across the three spheres of responsibility that we have. So as an organization, the IOC, as the leader of the Olympic movement, with a few hundred people we are, as owner of the Games, which is a most visible platform and we have the most impact, and as leader of the Olympic movement. So we committed to take action in these three spheres. So starting with the IOC, because we have to lead by example. We are rather small, but it was important for us to be, the leader and to be a role model. So what did we do? We are a global organization. We have a lot of carbon emissions coming from transportation as well. And we decided to reduce for a first step, by 30% of carbon emissions for this Olympiad, 21-24, compared to the last one. Obviously, we didn't count 2020 because of COVID. Yeah. And what we did is we introduced carbon budget for each entity of the IOC. So it means that they have a financial budget, an HR budget, and they have a carbon budget, and we treat carbon as a scarce resource. And we empower the managers to make the decision they want as part of this budget. As a result of that, we have indeed more than reduced by 30% of carbon emissions, and we are on our way to reduce by 50% by 2030. That's for the organization. When it comes to the Games, as we discussed earlier, Paris 2024 reduced by half the carbon footprint compared to the two previous editions, London and Rio. And how did they achieve that? It was the result of a co-creation together and a journey of 10 years. We completely changed the way we engage with the host. Now, we really, instead of in the past, we were asking the host how they could deliver the Games. Now the question is more, okay, what can the Games do for the host? And how they can accelerate the sustainable development of the host territory. Therefore, we discussed how Paris and the region of Paris, and more generally France, can leveraging the existing infrastructure or build only temporary ones, and to reduce the footprint. And this is what was done. I mean, you all watched the Games, and you saw that Paris was turned into a playground, the whole city. This building, but also the Seine, into a swimming pool, the feet of the Eiffel Tower in the beach volley arena. So we took advantage of everything that was existing, and the only very small venue that were built was the aquatic center and the villages in Saint-Denis, where we needed this infrastructure. So this helped reduce drastically the footprint, but obviously there were many more measures like renting instead of buying, using renewable energy, and so on. So we reduced the footprint of the Games, and we demonstrated it was feasible. Okay. And last but not least, we are active everywhere in the world, across the 206 territories and dozens of federations. And how can you engage this vast movement that is financed, by the way, by the revenue from the Games? We invest $4.7 million every day in sport worldwide. So how can you engage this very organization? They are very small sometimes. Sometimes there are 3 volunteers. So how do you do that? And for that, we created with UN Climate in 2018 a platform for action, Sport for Climate, which support this organization. Okay. And 300 of them have joined forces and committed to the Paris Agreement as we speak. and we are monitoring their progress.
Okay.
So we can say we have been working on the IOC, on the Games, and on the Olympic movement, and we are well underway to meet a commitment by 2030.
Thank you, Marie. Very, very interesting also to have this insight. The sport, as you know, has the power to inspire. There is some initiative, very interesting. I don't know if you know the Sport Sponsors Climate Pledge launched by the Change Now and 17 Sport a few years ago. The French Professional League is also putting some licensed club points to linked sports and sustainability. I have a question for you, Matthieu. Finally, why is it not so long, but what can we do to accelerate the sustainable transformation of the sport industry? What can we do? Because there is a lot of initiative, but it's still not going so quickly.
Like I said, a very large part of the carbon footprint of a sport event comes from transportation. So obviously, when you deal with short distance, you can use public transportation. You can use couches instead of individual cars. You can promote the tools, the many tools that helps you to avoid using individual cars and flights. So the reports that we did that only deals with rugby and sports, and football and sports in France shows that roughly for 90% of the travelers, there are solutions. If you have a bold policy to promote public transportation instead of using individual cars, and when possible, use train instead of plane. Okay. It's way more difficult when you deal with international competitions. But even with this scope, there are solutions. For instance, we did a study regarding the Olympics, and obviously they are. When it comes to the way that infrastructure were used, like you said, it's a very interesting progress that was unfolded for this Olympiad. But we believe that we could continue to progress by developing fan zones, not in France, but all over the world, to help give incentives not to take planes to come to France for some of the spectators that are interested in this kind of solutions. And we believe that that would be an interesting way to route the event, this international event, in each country that takes part of the to the competition, not by inciting people from, I don't know, Latin America or Asia to come to Paris this year, but to stay in their country and to use fan zones that could give the vibe of the event in their domestic country. That's the kind of solution that we would like to promote.
Thank you, Matthieu. Marie, I know that you want to answer Matthieu, but I have a question for you. What gives you hope for the world ecosystem, for the world of sport? What gives you hope that the sport can fit with the Paris Agreement? You were also speaking about an athlete initiative that you have. Can you very quickly answer to Matthieu and share your answer?
Yeah, not just to follow on Matthieu. I mean, you were watching the games and you were part of the 5 billion, and I say billions, of people watching the games. Out of these 5 billion people, only a few million came on site, and out of these 4 million, we had 8% that represented 80% of the emissions.
It's the hugest part, yeah.
Exactly, and this is the hugest part, and this is a population we need to work on for the future. But more generally, why I am confident in the future? First, because yes, it took us 10 years to get where we are, but we demonstrated already with Paris, the first edition of this agenda, that we could make progress, and tremendous progress in 10 years. Second, I believe we will continue to be made accountable by our stakeholders, our audience, but also our athletes. I mean, a few years back, prior to the COP, right after Tokyo 2020, 50 athletes came to us and say, we want to be part of this journey and we want to work alongside you. Recently, 400 athletes wrote to the future president to say, we want to be part of the journey and we want you to continue to accelerate the pace. So the athletes being at the heart of the movement, as you heard earlier, very committed themselves. I'm very confident that they can support and help us sustain the momentum.
Thank you very
much. Let's continue the journey.
Thank you, Marie and Matthieu. An infinite growth in a finite world is impossible.
You said it.
Yeah. What is your hope for the sport ecosystem? Do you have a vision? What is your
when we discuss energy transition, usually we stop with electricity. Sometimes we talk about energy, but we seldom talk about how energy is used. And actually, you can figure the issue this way. Energy is like the lifeblood, is like blood in our organism. When you, for instance, that's the case for sports, but that's the case for any sector that uses energy. You have to face the fact that it's going to be very complicated to keep the same level of consumption without petroleum or fossil fuels. Therefore, you have to, at a certain stage, you have to transform, you have to modify the way the energy is used. That's why we say you have to focus on, at a certain stage, you have to focus on solutions that make you avoid plane travels, for instance. There is no way that we can decarbonize the economy without reducing, collectively, reduce the energy that we need to make our system work. There is no way, because fossil fuels are the most abundant, the easiest form of energy, and that's the only reason why it's still so huge in the worldwide energy mix.
Thank you very much, Matthieu. You can upload these two persons with us, inspiring guests. Thank you very much, Marie. Thank you, Matthieu. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, do you know, have you ever read a study from the MIT that say that athletes are today in the society the most influential personalities? Before politicians, before singers, before influencers, the athletes are the most followed and inspiring people on the society. So when they speak about a topic, when they speak about sustainability or social impact, they have a massive role to play. So now, let's pivot to the grassroots, also to the people turning values into action. This apple pie of lots of personalities. Please welcome Antoine Pin from Protect Our Winter, Laure Jarlaud from Outdoor Sport Valley, and Hilary Jardi. Thank you very much. Please. Hello, Antoine. Hello, Laure.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Hilary. Please take a seat or stand. It's better, yeah. Cool. So you will talk about an amazing project called The Ordinary Project. Floor is yours.
Thanks, François. Hi, everyone. And first, let me apologize for the French accent, but I think you get used to it by the end of the day. I'm here to tell you that athletes can have a positive impact by having influence on their peers as well as wider communities. However, the efforts and the message should not rest solely on their shoulder. It should be conveyed in conjunction with the industry, brands, sponsors, event organizers, as well as the organizations that oversee the sport activities, such as federation, clubs, and the states. Like Madame Sallois told us, sports brings us together. They encourage us to efforts to do efforts. They encourage us for progression. They teach us collaboration. They teach us responsibility. And those are the values that we need to collectively face the climate and social crisis that we find ourselves in. And this is the ambition for the Ordinary projects. Larry?
So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for welcoming us here on the Legacy stage. Just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Hilary Gerardi, and, well, it's marked behind me. I'm a mountain endurance athlete. I grew up in the US. I've lived in France for 15 years, and I specialize in a kind of mountain running that's very technical, have to use your hands to scramble around a bit. But I was competing on an international circuit of races for nearly a decade. I stopped at the end of last year. Then it had me traveling all around the world. And during that time, I think that, I was certainly aware. I knew about climate change. I was a bit engaged in climate change. But I wasn't necessarily making the connection about my own practices and the impact that I was having. And it wasn't until 2020 with COVID, when all of the races were canceled, that I kind of started to step back and think a bit more critically about what I was doing. And it was at that time that I started making changes in how I approached my sport. And what I found, my experience, was that being an athlete, climate advocate, or activist can be pretty lonely. Honestly, there aren't a lot of us, and we're trying to operate and compete at a high level in a context that's really not made for sustainability. It can be very tough. I think that, the majority of athletes are actually aware, at least I should say athletes in Europe are aware of climate change and how it will impact their sport and the challenges that it will pose for us as individuals and as society. But when I speak to my peers, I see that there's a lot of obstacles that get in the way of them being able to take action. And, maybe, for example, it's that they don't feel legitimate because they don't know enough about climate change, or maybe they don't know what would have the biggest the biggest impact. Maybe they don't have the support of their sponsors. Maybe they're afraid of getting criticized, or they just feel like a hypocrite. There are many different reasons. All of them are legitimate. Now, at risk of sounding maybe a little bit cliche, everyone here who's done sports, and even if they've done individual sports, knows about teamwork. And when I learned about this project that OSV was working on, this Ordinary project, that's what I identified it as, an opportunity for teamwork. Now, it is an opportunity. We're going to bring together athletes and brands, and we're going to bring together a panel of experts and nonprofits, communications experts, scientists, industries, folks all coming together to work together to affect change, to help welcome another class, another generation of activists and athletes to the movement. And it's something really that can be motivating for athletes. It's something that can be effective, and we hope it's something that can be really fun.
Thank you, Hilary. Laure?
Yes, hi, I'm Laure Jarlaud. I'm Vice President of Outdoor Sports Valley, a network of committed outdoor brands. Our role is to support our members in their day-to-day activities and to help them in their transition. Let me talk about the genesis of this program. It's all started with a conversation between a sports marketing manager and his athletes, because they wanted to take action, but they don't know how. So they turned to Outdoor Sports Valley, which in just a few months bring together a collective outdoor brands like Lapierre, Salomon, Petzl, Pictures, Julbo, Rossignol, etc. And all these brands, which are competitors sometimes, decided to co-build a training and engagement program, and the Ordinary project was created. In October, we will launch the first cohort of the Ordinary project, and about 10 pairs of athletes with their sponsors, the federation, will embark in this ambitious adventure. our goal by 2030 is to have trained and engaged hundreds of athletes. And we hope that besides they could embark hundreds and thousands and millions of people through their community. This program illustrates the strength of OSV and of its DNA collaborative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laure. You want last word for you?
Yeah, I'll finish it off so that you can go for lunch. So quickly, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Antoine, the head manager for Protect Our Winters France. What we try to do is turn passion into purpose. We raise and amplify the voice of the outdoor community to act on climate change and fight for social justice. So through our work, we meet athletes, brands, federations, sponsors. Most of the time, it's one without the other. And yes, through our work, sometimes we go into joyful yet pressing confrontations, but we still need a platform where all the stakeholders can meet, grow together, and act collectively. So I think today will not sound out of the ordinary. That's exactly what it is, an ordinary project for the time we live in. Thank you, and you can come and learn more.
Thank you. You can applaud them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laure, Hilary, Antoine. So now we are at the climax of this panel. As you may know, our challenge as sustainable experts is to make the sustainable transition cool and fun. I have the honor and the pleasure to welcome an amazing guest, a superstar within the sport industry. He has a voice. He is poetical. So it's a surprise. But please make an applaud for Omar Da Fonseca. Omar. Floor is yours, Omar. As the superstars, he's here. Please, Omar, take floors.
Bonjour.
How are you doing? Fine.
Fine,
Floor
merci
is yours,
beaucoup.
floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tous. D'abord, évidemment que après beaucoup d'anglais, désolé, mais en argentin, on va vous parler en français. Et ensuite, le fait que ma mémoire est plutôt fébrile, je vais donc vous lire quelques lignes. Bonjour à tous, merci de m'avoir fait l'honneur de m'inviter. En tant qu'ex-joueur de football, commentateur, père, aujourd'hui grand-père, français d'adoption, et plus simplement en tant qu'homme, depuis 50 ans et sur plusieurs continents, j'ai pu mesurer comme vous tous la formidable puissance du sport. Ce qu'il révèle comme vice et comme vertu, mais surtout ce qu'il permet. Le sport, vecteur émotionnel, qui nous fait réagir, agir, éclairer, qui nous offre une parenthèse enchantée. Le sport nous éveille à l'esprit. C'est vrai que depuis quelque temps, notre humanité a un peu compliqué le match. On est au bord d'une lourde défaite. Mais comme je suis un optimiste, utopiste, réaliste, je sens qu'en modifiant notre plan de jeu, un peu, on peut retourner la situation et même finir pour gagner. Pas besoin de changer les règles, mais il faut modifier notre façon de jouer et surtout de penser. Je sais que je ne suis pas le meilleur exemple. Je vis des commentaires de sport les plus commercialisés. Je fais des pubs pour des paris sportifs et des pizzas. Et tout ça, c'est à cause de ma grand-mère. Vous savez, en Argentine, on a la tradition de manger des pizzas presque tous les jours. Et aussi, il nous motivait à jouer, vous rigolez, il nous forçait à jouer au loto et au bingo. Incroyable, non? Malgré ça, je suis convaincu que tous ensemble, avec bienveillance, les uns pour les autres, on peut s'entraider pour modifier nos comportements. Pachamama, la terre-mère. Comme on dit en Argentine, il n'y a qu'une seule famille, l'humanité. Respecter à nouveau notre mère et notre famille est la condition même de notre survie. Il nous reste moins d'une mi-temps pour cette remontada. Moins d'une mi-temps pour faire de nos erreurs un chemin vers l'humanité, vers l'unité aussi. Parce que le futur n'existe pas, parce que le passé n'existe plus. Il ne reste que le présent pour réaliser notre rêve et tous ensemble soulever dès aujourd'hui le trophée des JO comparatifs de 2048, de la responsabilité et de la solidarité. Vamos!
Standing ovation for you.
Bon salon, salut à tous. Merci.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Wow. Okay, it was powerful. So thank you very much. Thank you to see that the sport ecosystem has a role to play to tackle the sustainable transition. Vive le sport. Thank you again. Thank you very much.